Welcome back. I'm Doug Raaberg, Executive Vice President for the Air Force Association here in Arlington, Virginia. Joining me from Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, is the key leader who understands the complexity of sustaining and modernizing ballistic missile operations for our nation. Please welcome my guest, the commander of the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center and Program Executive Officer for the Strategic Systems, Major General Anthony Augie Genatempo. Augie, good morning.
Good morning to you, Doug. Hope I'm coming in loud and clear for you. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Sir, you're coming in 5 by. Looking forward to this conversation. I see you have the daunting task and responsibility for life cycle management and certification of nuclear weapon systems for 2 strategic legs of the nuclear triad. Now, your portfolio spans everything from the Minuteman III ICBM, air-launched cruise missile, B-61 nuclear weapon, and NC-3, or Nuclear Command and Control Communications programs. In my opinion, that's a significant portion of our nation's nuclear deterrence posture. So thank you for joining me. It's going to be a great morning, and we have plenty to talk about. So Augie, set the stage for us with your assessment of and perhaps insights into maintaining our nation's deterrent capability, especially in an era of aging nuclear infrastructure. Over to you.
What a great opportunity and a daunting responsibility to follow up that great conversation that General Ray just had. I hope the people listening in right now were able to actually tune into that. General Ray has been an incredible advocate for the acquisition programs that are providing him the capabilities that he provides to Stratcom. I could not have set the stage better. And, it's been a real pleasure working with him, working for him. And I'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about, who exactly my bosses are and who my stakeholders are. But as you mentioned, right now, we have not seen a modernization effort in the nuclear portfolio for the United States Air Force in decades. And we are doing all of our modernization at the same time. We are upgrading our ICBM land leg force of the triad. We are upgrading our air-launched cruise missile force of the triad. We are upgrading our gravity weapon force of the triad, as well as upgrading a number of our facilities and key subcomponents of those weapon systems. So all of that is happening concurrently right now. And the amount of growth, the amount of excitement, the amount of pressure and stress has not really been this high in a number of decades. No one in our portfolio, in our workforce, there are very few gray-bearded and not much hair on their head folks left that remember a time like this with the amount of effort that's going on. So keeping track of all of that, mitigating risk associated with that, that's one of our key and most daunting tasks at this time.
Boy, great start. In fact, on the backbone of what we just heard with Orville and General Ray, and then you add to that last week's testimony of the Secretary of Defense and our chairman at the SAS committee, I think you and I are going to cover a lot. So let me start with the fact that probably many in our audience really may not be aware of the Nuclear Weapons Center. So I'm going to break it into 2 simple questions, starting with, who are you responsible to?
Sure thing. The Nuclear Weapons Center is part of Air Force Materiel Command, and General Ray kind of talked about the relationship that and the responsibility that Air Force Materiel Command has for the bomber leg of the triad, and I am primarily responsible for the ICBM force of the triad, as well as the weapons that are carried by the bomber leg of the triad. So I say that I have 3 hats, and I have 3 bosses that I report to. First and foremost, as commander of the Nuclear Weapons Center, I report to General Arnie Bunch, the Air Force Materiel Command commander. And he is responsible and helps me with the organize, train, and equip of this workforce to perform this mission. The next hat that I report to is where you mentioned my other job, where I'm the PEO, or the Program Executive Officer for Strategic Systems. So I'm responsible to the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, who's headquartered in Washington, D.C., for program execution. All of the efforts that we're going through right now, modernizing them, are run through the SAF AQ portfolio, the investment portfolio. I have a sustainment aspect of our currently fielded systems that are run through the Air Force Materiel Command portfolio. The third hat that I wear was to the gentleman that we were just talking to, General Ray. I very much consider him to be my one significant key customer. I have been set up as the focal point for everything nuclear related to the United States Air Force that the commander of a Global Strike Command can pick up the phone and call and talk to. So I sit on General Ray's weekly staff meetings, just like one of his numbered air forces or one of his bomber wings or one of his ICBM wings. And just to be that inclusive, and for me to have the amount of interaction I have with Global Strike Command staff is something that I have not really been involved with or have had that experience with throughout my career in acquisition. I also have some other stakeholders too that we work very closely with the Office of the Secretary of Defense. The NOB, which is the Nuclear Oversight Board. We are a very key player in informing that deliberative and decision-making body on the nuclear posture for the Department of Defense. I also have a very unique relationship with the Department of Energy. It's one of, when we talk about joint agency, I'm the joint department, right? So it is the United States Air Force in conjunction with the Department of Energy that brings the full up weapons system. You can basically draw the dividing line, perhaps, where the Department of Energy is responsible for the explosive package, and I'm responsible for the delivery systems and then delivering the all up round, which is the delivery system and the explosive package out to our warfighter. So a lot of different people involved, but it's a very tight knit and synergistic group that I am in constant communication with from my level throughout the entirety of my team.
Yeah, Augie, you're right almost at the epicenter of the historic Manhattan Project. Let me expand on that some more. What you just said is, so from academia, perhaps even to industry, who would you say are some of your stakeholders, shareholders, and perhaps customers from those areas?
Sure. So Kirtland Air Force Base, located here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's only about an hour and a half away from Los Alamos, New Mexico. We're only about, where the Manhattan Project was started. We're only about 2.5 hours away from White Sands, where the very first nuclear explosive test was conducted. And we have a very strong relationship with the White Sands Missile Test Range, located on Kirtland Air Force Base's Sandia National Labs, where we have a lot of collaborative efforts and a lot of integration efforts. Every one of our programs has a counterpart with the nuclear package, and the development and modernization of those packages have to form up at the very end to deliver a capability on the schedule that we have promised General Ray and promised Admiral Richard at STRATCOM. So the National Nuclear Security Agency, the NNSA, is located as a very large component out here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I actually have a counterpart, a program executive officer at NNSA, that he and I talk quite often as well. So Albuquerque, New Mexico is very much a hub and center of nuclear development and modernization and sustainment activity for our nation.
So from there, let's still stay at the weapons center because it's important. Let's talk about your people. I imagine our audience would like to know how broad the spectrum of disciplines that you have in your military, civilian, and perhaps your industry partner workforce. What does it look like from your vantage point as the commander?
So you're right. We have a wide array of disciplines, scientific engineering, in each of our program offices, where we're located at numerous different places. We're out in Ogden, Utah at Hill Air Force Base, where our ICBM programs are located. Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma has our air launch cruise missile, and the replacement for that effort is being run out of Eglin Air Force Base on the panhandle of Florida. Our nuclear command and control and communications is being run out of Boston area, out of Hanscom Air Force Base up in the Massachusetts area. The program office consists of a number of different functions of people. We have program managers, we have contract specialists and procurement contracting officers, financial analysts, cost analysts, budget analysts, logistics specialists, supply chain specialists. We run safety specialists, let me keep going, nuclear certification specialists, and then almost every engineering specialty that you can possibly think of that works with the larger engineering and expertise group that we have resident in our national laboratories like Los Alamos and Sandia, Lawrence Livermore. We utilize expertise at the MITRE Corporation and at the Aerospace Corporation, which are federally funded research and development centers. So our reach is very broad, it's very wide, and we pull in that expertise as needed to work with our industry counterparts to make these programs come in on time and on the schedule that we have promised and that our warfighter has set a requirement for.
If you don't mind, let us step in kind of a little bit in your shoes, and this is a follow-up question that was asked of General Ray. From your point of view, why is there a very large bow wave of nuclear modernization programs, especially those that are in works now?
Sure. I think it was the realization General Ray mentioned about 5 or 6 years ago that the decision was made by the administration at the time, carried forward by the next administration, that we have reached the end of the sustainment juice that we could squeeze. Okay, it's becoming very cost prohibitive to keep the current capabilities that we have. So the decision was made a number of years ago to proceed down the modernize and replacement path. So Minuteman III has been nuclear certified for quite some time, and Alchem has been nuclear certified for quite some time. And all of our aircraft with their current B-61 variants have been certified for quite some time. Now that we're doing all of those modernization efforts, we have to go through a recertification process for the newer systems that are replacing them. And that is what has absolutely created this bow wave. It certainly is an area of concern for ourselves, the Air Force, for the new Weapons Center, for the Department of Defense. And we've spent some considerable time putting a number of different practices in place, a number of different tool sets in place in order for us to effectively manage the amount of effort that we have in front of us, but also to give us a little bit of predictive analysis as well. If General Ray happens to come to us at some point in time and says he needs to accelerate something, you know, we need to have a handle on what exactly that means. And, you know, the analogy I use is if you envision this entire effort as a jelly donut, and if we're going to take a bite out of it at a different corner, you know, what side of the donut does the jelly squeeze out on that we now have to mitigate, right, in order to not make a mess? We want to keep it all intact. We want to keep everything on track. But we live in a world of finite resources, and we're going to have to be a little bit more adept at shifting them around to handle this bow wave and any other perturbations that come forward based on requirements.
You know, General, I saw in the testimony last week, for example, the question was asked about the research and development and the funding for that. I'm not going to go there, but what it really brought to mind was you're at the leading edge when the funding flows down. And I'm confident our audience would really like to know is, from your vantage point, and when the funding does arrive, how do you go about sustaining and modernizing these aging systems? A little bit of insight or peek into your process.
Sure. The efforts that we have ongoing right now in modernization are taking us into a new era. Using, General Ray had mentioned our model-based system engineering, using big data and analytics to get after the various problem sets that we have. We are lifting that and applying that to our current sustainment force as well. So what kind of predictive maintenance are we going to need for the Minuteman III force over the next decade? And how can we maximize the limited funds that we have, use the minimum funds that we have to maximize the amount of effort that we can get over where those funds need to be applied. With Minuteman III, however, there's a lot of unknown unknowns. We know a lot of things about the age of our systems and when things are going to start happening, especially on the air vehicle side. But quite honestly, we keep discovering new things on our ground systems and in our launch facilities and with our support equipment that after 58 years of service, we don't have a predictive analysis to know when some of those things might happen. Right? We're dealing with things like rust. We're dealing with things like water intrusion. We're dealing with things like door seals not sealing anymore. Someone said to me once, or asked me the question, what's the one thing that keeps me up at night about our Minuteman III force? And I said to them, half jokingly, but to make the point, I worry about HVAC. And they look at me a little strangely and all oddly going, you worry about HVAC? I said, yes. I said, I have no idea how old those water lines are or how old those vents are or when that may or may not become an issue that we will then have to deal with and handle and apply resources to. And as more time goes on, the number of those unknown unknowns is going to expand. And that's why I believe the decision was made 5-6 years ago to go, let's stop trying to keep solving that problem and replace this with a system that we can work on that is more reliable, that is safer, and that is easier to maintain. And the GBSD system and the LRSO system, the long-range strike option, which is the Alchem replacement, are most certainly designed that way from the get-go, right? Very simply, Minuteman III was a 10-year weapon system that was asked to last 60 years. We are building GBSD to be a 70-year weapon system that we can maintain and increase its capability to stay relevant over 70 years. And that's a big difference in how you go about designing a system and then the value you get out of it afterwards.
I think you just walked us into a very important conversation, and obviously from ground-based strategic deterrence, the modernization of the bomber fleet to the B-21, and other parts of the triad to include SLBM, the submarine launch systems and so forth. But if you bring it back to your two legs that you're responsible for, Augie, what do you now see as producing the best cost per effect? And this may be a little unfair question, but it really boils down to is cost per effect better modernizing or modifying the current systems we have, or perhaps building new ones? For example, warheads.
Sure. I'm a firm believer in the analysis that was done in 2005 and the continued analysis that has happened almost yearly right up until this year as to what it is going to cost us to maintain the current capability for our ICBM force with Minuteman III. And right now, I just do not see the data that shows that that is a cost-effective option for us. And we can lay that out in a number of different ways along a number of different lines, right? I think we have the data to back up that story, that it is more cost-effective to go down the GBSD route, let alone that GBSD is going to meet the requirements of our STRATCOM COCOM commander, where Minuteman III in its current state will not meet the future requirements that were laid out for us. So I think from strictly a business case, I think the data is there that we can make that case, that the case has been made to go down the route of GBSD. And again, from the maintenance side on Minuteman III, we're constantly refining those numbers, and that number is doing nothing but going up as we discover more things as time goes by. The other thing that I appreciate more about GBSD, again, is what it brings to our folks in the field, our defenders in the field. It is a more safe, more reliable system. Right? Now, that's not to say that Minuteman III is not safe and not reliable. It is. I have confidence in that. I think General Ray has confidence in that. But I don't think we're ever going to say that it's safe enough, and we're not going to continue to try to work on that for our defenders and for the folks that have to be around that incredibly dangerous weapon system every day. Right? So a lot of the maintenance practices that have been incorporated into the design for GBSD make it a more safe and more reliable system than Minuteman III is. And that's something that is of high interest to General Ray, to make sure that his folks that are performing that mission every day do so with an assurity that they're working on something that they can count on and that they have trust in.
You know, based on my experience, especially through nuclear all the way to the B2 of today, you know, the backbone of all our nuclear posture relies on solid nuclear command and control communications. So now we're talking about joint all-domain command and control and air battle management systems. So how do they relate in the nuclear arena, especially within the NC3 architect that you're responsible for and sustaining?
Absolutely. I think one of the best things that we have done in Air Force Materiel Command and in Air Force Acquisition was to recognize that nuclear command, control, and communications is in fact a weapon system unto itself. And that determination was made, and that designation was made only a few years ago. And that really enabled us to put a highly trained and dedicated group of people up at Hanscom Air Force Base and surrounding labs and infrastructure that's up there to really start putting their head and their thoughts around what that entails, what the pieces are, and how best to affect and control them and to bring them into the 21st century. Colonel Amanda Cato, who's the program executive officer for that weapon system, has one of the most daunting tasks of any PEO that I know. It is beyond herding cats. She's responsible for a weapon system where 70 to 75% of it, she does not own the actual hardware that belongs as part of her weapon system, right? So bringing that all together, getting all of the disparate entities together to focus on, to fund, and to move that effort forward is something that we are just getting our legs under us and running. And I think the recognition at the national level, at the OSD level, and at Air Force leadership level as to the importance of NC3 moving forward. Again, General Ray, I couldn't have said it any better, and I appreciate his words and his support. So the Nuclear Weapons Center, along with Colonel Cato as the PEO, are going to be lending a lot of weight and a lot of expertise to making sure we're incorporating what they need into what I am responsible for developing as the PEO for strategic systems, and that they are tightly coupled moving forward. But again, it's not just me. Colonel Cato deals with at least 7 other program executive officers trying to push and pull on that noodle to get those priorities lined up. So there's a lot of excitement. In fact, I'm heading on a plane up to see those folks and spending the week with them right after we're finished here talking.
You know, Augie, let's talk about the elephant in the room. In the past months, perhaps years, we've seen cyber become more intrusive. We saw it in the petroleum industry just recently. We've seen it in the food industry and so forth. So again, from your vantage point, how do you secure our sensitive nuclear infrastructure from cyber intrusion or perhaps espionage?
Sure. So for our current systems, we have a pretty rigorous program that is continual in checking for faults, vulnerabilities, and pathways that could lead towards places that we don't want to go and things that we don't want open. So for Minuteman III and for Alchem and for our B61 series, there are a number of different efforts going on both at the base and local level, as well as in the program office level, and then the higher command and control level. For our newer development efforts, they are absolutely key performance parameters that have been incorporated into the design of the system. So we are working very closely with intelligence in the area of cyber, and those intelligence communities have working groups, periodic working groups established within each of the program offices, constantly feeding the latest intel, not only into like the design of our system, but we're also very concerned about supply chain and with our contractors and how they are protecting the development and modernization efforts that are going forward. So it is constantly on our mind. It is part of all of our documentation and planning. So the milestone B, not to get too acquisition E's on you, but a major milestone effort. Think of it like for a rocket launch. It's a go, no-go decision point that the ground-based strategic deterrent just underwent in this past September, and the LRSO program just had it this past May to move forward into the next phase of development. And as part of that documentation, we had to prove to a very large audience that we have incorporated aspects of cybersecurity, intelligence, and mitigation steps to make sure that we're protecting our most valued information.
Perfect segue. Air-launched cruise missiles. Let's get down to some actual weapon systems. You know, for our audience, may not know that the air-launched cruise missiles are due to be replaced in time by the long-range standoff weapon. So my question for you is, will the Alchems or air-launched cruise missiles be phased out, and or will they be removed all at once and the LRSO take over as a weapon system?
You bet. Very similar to the GBSD and Minuteman III concept that we have, there will be a phase out and a phase in transition phase where we'll have both of those weapon systems in our inventory at the same time. And as production increases on LRSO and more of those come online, then we will be taking Alchems out of the inventory. The whole point is that we are maintaining a level or a requirement level in our inventory that has been asked for by Global Strike Command and STRATCOM, right? We're not looking to drop below that capability. We want our COCOM commander, Admiral Richard, to have a known quantity of capability available to him at all times. There will be no break in that. So asking Alchem to wait until the end of the LRSO production run is just going to be, again, slightly more cost prohibitive. So we're doing a phase in, phase out approach on that weapon system.
I'll make the statement. It seems that you're inextricably linked to nuclear strike plans based on literally the movement of weapons and their availability in the arsenal. So that was very insightful, Augie. Thank you. Let me shift now back to the really the GBSD program. Really, is there or what flexibility is really being built into the GBSD program, really in case there is a change in treaty regimes? I know you're not clairvoyant, but are there flexibilities being built into the program?
Sure. Right now, GBSD is being built and will be fielded in full compliance with the New START treaty that is currently in place, and will be adaptable enough to move forward with whatever form the New START treaty takes in the future. that was one of our going in positions to give General Ray that flexibility as to the force that he can field for Admiral Richard. So I don't have any concerns in that regard. As far as we're building something that becomes irrelevant at the change of a treaty based on what the administration is able to accomplish and what goals that they have. We have a nuclear posture review that is coming up by the current administration, which will be happening towards the end of the summer, maybe into fall. And that will possibly provide new guidance. And the whole point of the GBSD program is to make sure we are adaptable enough to maintain our relevancy and not have to go backwards or start over. We don't have time to go backwards or start over. And I'm very proud of our program office, as well as Northrop Grumman in this regard, that we have a system that will be able to stay relevant regardless of the changes or the posture of the administration or the political environment in the future.
So I'm going to back up a little bit, but so what growing challenges do you face to keep dual portions of the triad safe and secure? And then I'm going to follow up on an NC3 question of the same nature, Augie.
Well, again, keeping the two legs of the triad safe and secure in the current fielded weapon systems that came online in an era where no one really could spell cyber, let alone knew what that meant, have been challenges to get those systems to a safe and secure place decades after they were first envisioned. The best way to address those challenges is to field a modern system that incorporates those aspects into its design from the get-go and allows that design to be modular and adaptable in the future. The Minuteman III design nor the Alchem design are modular in that aspect. It would, in essence, be we would have to, again, build a brand new weapon system in order to get after some key attributes of both Minuteman III or Alchem that we would like to change. We're not going to be able to do that. So we're moving forward with GBSD on LRSO, but that shell, okay, that basic framework is going to be viable for a much longer period of time than the framework of Minuteman III or the framework of Alchem. And we will be able to adapt. We will be able to take line replaceable units out of our major weapon systems, whether that be propulsion, whether that be guidance or navigation, or whether that be warhead. And we'll be able to adapt the missile that we have that we're designing today to be relevant into the future. So, you know, I keep going back to the relevancy part. Relevancy is very much tied to being safe and secure. Okay, we are able to incorporate new things that we have, new upgrades that we have, new technologies that we have in a much easier way with how GBSD and LRSO are being designed, way more than the way Minuteman III or Alchem were designed.
You know, previously, General Ray and General Wright were talking about the no-fail aspect of our nuclear architect, especially the enterprise itself. And after what I just heard from you, and it's very important, is you're dealing with a broader enterprise from the ultimate authority, the President of the United States, and make sure that the President is connected to the entire nuclear enterprise through the NC3 system. So does the same challenge apply in your dealing with the NC3 systems?
It does. Especially from a software aspect where so many more parts of each of the NC3 system as well as the actual weapon systems are going to be software driven and derive their capability and their power from the software attributes that they have. You know, you mentioned the 0-100% aspect of the world we live in, and that has been one of the most eye-opening things for me joining this portfolio, is that our end product has to work 0% of the time when we don't want it to, and 100% of the time when we do. And I don't think you can apply that standard to anything else that we do, either as an Air Force or as a United States military. There is always some level of risk that can be accepted. So when we talk about taking risk in the nuclear portfolio, it almost kind of makes you scratch your head a little bit. How do you take risk in a 100% gain? And the way that I've come to realize that and wrap my brain around it is that we can certainly take risk in the journey, but we're not taking risk in the end product. And I think, General Ray alluded to, how proud he was of the programs that he has fielding this new capability. We are very much at the forefront and cutting edge for the Department of Defense in incorporating 21st century commercial and business practices and engineering practices and software development tool sets in the development of our weapon systems of GBSD and LRSO and B-61 and across the board. And we are taking risk in those, and we are trying new things. And if we fail, well, then we're failing on the bench test, and then we're moving on to something else to eventually get to that 100% assurity of that end product. So I'm very proud to be part of this enterprise. And, just to give a little kudos to our GBSD team, winning last year's Packard Award for Innovation and Excellence, because they truly are at the forefront of model-based system engineering and incorporating a digital backbone. So much so that everyone in the Department of Defense is, heading out to Hill Air Force Base to see what we're doing out there and trying to learn those lessons. And that's very much a part of our culture too. Colonel Jason Bartolome, the program director there, has actually set up a schoolhouse where his folks who have been working and living this for the past 6 years are accepting others out to Hill to help teach and learn so they can go back and incorporate those ideas into their systems moving forward. So I think we're doing a lot as far as, again, safe, secure, modular, relevant for the future, and taking a step into the 21st century that's been long overdue for the nuclear portfolio.
I think what you just summarized is why we're having this entire series with AFA and our partners, especially as you talk about taking it to Utah at Ogden and so forth. So we're going to go into a quick lightning round, if you don't mind, because I see our time is coming short here. But Augie, it's been decades since a real nuclear weapon system has been fielded. Let's quickly unpack a few of the particular risks that you're trying to mitigate. And I'm going to back up because you mentioned it. Let's start with the president's aircraft. Any risks that you're having to mitigate for that?
There are certainly lots of aspects of Colonel Cato's portfolio involved with the Air Force One and the presidential airlift requirement. So we are working very closely with that program executive officer out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, currently General Ryan Britton. And, the tie-in there, as well as with ABMS and JADC2, to make sure that there are viable, but not the only pathways for nuclear command, control, and communication. But the more nodes we have and the more pathways we have, the harder a target that becomes for our adversaries to contemplate going after. All right, and that is the ultimate goal, because a robust NC3 portfolio and a robust NC3 structure feeds directly into nuclear deterrence and what actually deters our enemies. That's part of what I call, when they wake up in the morning, they do the math. And hopefully at the end of that morning, by doing the math, they go, today's not a good day to take on the United States. And we move forward in the world that has existed since 1945, right? That's my job, is to make sure those capabilities are in place, that when our adversaries do the math, they come up with an answer that is not acceptable to them to try to do anything other than what they're doing today, which is keeping the peace.
I like that a lot. And, you know, when you're talking about NC3, I think you've just alluded to is all domains open, space, air, cyber, for connectivity. So let me do another lightning round. Certification and mission readiness of the B-21 itself. Any risk mitigation concerns?
Yeah, what we've actually done is we have personnel from the Nuclear Weapons Center, from our certification directorate, embedded in each of those programs. So I have a number of folks out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I have someone in the RCO program with B-21 that are working with the program management team of each of those platforms to make sure that the certification efforts are keeping pace with the acquisition effort. All right, it's not something that falls to the side or falls behind and needs to get slapped on afterwards, because that's where we then run into timing issues, right? They can get the weapon system ready to go, but if the certification's not in place, it's not a viable weapon system. And the importance of that and giving those program managers the tools where they can effectively manage certification tasks in conjunction with our team has been a very key risk mitigator for us, especially during this huge bow wave section that we're in. And we're finding a lot of positive feedback from that.
Let's talk about the F-35, because I think this is going to be an important component to the nuclear enterprise. So what do you see as the timeline for the F-35 to actually be certified for the nuclear mission? And then let me follow up on the testing aspect. Let's talk about the certification of the aircraft itself.
Sure. There are, again, a number of different efforts going on. I kind of get briefed on those every week. I'm in coordination with Lieutenant General Fick, the Joint Program Office Director, and we talk quite often about the certification activities. And right now they're going very well. To include the testing aspects, we just had a number of successful tests with F-35. The timing right now, I think, to get to full certification is probably a handful of years away with the number of things that we have to go through, but it's not something that I'm considering to be on a critical path right now. I believe we have what we need to do well in hand. The resources have been applied to accomplish those tasks. The aircraft are available to do those tasks. And it's just staying on top of it, right? It's just the diligence to stay on top of that. There's a lot on F-35's plate, right? And understanding what's going on in their world to give them appropriate feedback, again, as to what side of the donut does the jelly squish out on, right? Okay, that's a very large enterprise, and we are an important player for them in helping them manage everything that's on their plate.
So when do you expect F-35, you know, and I see it as, and we all do, as a sensor platform entering into the system. So when do you expect testing to occur?
Testing's occurring right now. We'll probably get into full operational testing within the next 2 years. I would say probably the 2023 timeframe.
Yeah, very good. Augie, we got about a minute left, and really, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today and hearing your thoughts. So what final thought would you like to leave our audience? Because this is really important discussion about the Nuclear Weapons Center. So over to you.
Sure, I appreciate that, Doug. You know, literally right before you and I got on to talk, I had an opportunity to talk to a bunch of high school students that are starting a program, an internship program out at Tinker Air Force Base, and they're going to be spending a week with our outcome program office. And my conversation with them, as well as with a number of other people just out in our country, wherever I travel to, people I just talked to out of the blue, how very little our population, our citizens know about our current nuclear forces and what the nuclear triad is. I said, I explained to the kids, and probably you as well, you know, Doug, you and I grew up in a time, especially me in New York City, where I grew up, that nuclear fallout drills in my public school were just as common as fire drills. And today, that's an unheard of experience that folks that are my son's age or, in elementary and high school today, they have no concept of and don't know anything about what our nuclear forces are, what a nuclear triad is, what countries in the world possess these weapons, and what posture that gives them at the table where all countries gather to kind of search for and look for their own best interest, right? That's what sovereign nations do. So the education piece that AFA is undergoing right now, I can't emphasize enough that there is an entire generation of folks out there that don't know and understand what the nuclear portfolio provides to the United States as a whole as a backbone for everything we do on the world stage. So I applaud you and AFA's efforts. I very much appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of what I know and what I bring to this table. And any re-engagement or continual engagement, I'm more than happy to do for you guys.
Well, thank you, Major General Genatempo, and I'm going to take you up on that offer. But until then, fly safe to your next event. We'll now take a break to hear from our sponsors and return with a panel discussion on the imperatives of ICBM modernization. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Where is possible? Past the edge of convention, beyond the boundaries of tomorrow, where no idea is too bold and no challenge too great. It's here where we break free from what is to what could be. Because defining the future is impossible until it's not.
Look, sweetheart, Daddy worked on that.
Wow!
I want your dreams to soar just like that rocket.
From here, we monitor the spacecraft and help the astronauts get home.
Dad, this is awesome.
You can become anything you want. And the sky's the limit.
Do you have what it takes?